yeah, we hope to go into a bit more detail about that. Thank you. Oops, with the mouse.
Yeah.
Got it.
So as much as this video, this presentation is being recorded, it's being recorded for the Shire Serpentine Serpentine Jarrahdale, sorry, who is actually hosting and supporting this event tonight, and so it'll be up to them to share. Thank you.
So just as a quick overview for today's session, first we'll be discussing what actually is great food, and that's going to mean different things to different people. So we'll do a little activity to go through that with each of you. And then we will be looking at soil microbes. You'll get to see them, and we'll have some images. You'll be able to learn how to identify them, and then we'll actually have a look at some real ones from some of Ellen's compost tonight. We're going to talk about how to care for those microbes, and then we hope to end with about 15 minutes for some question and answers. Oops. These slide transitions are a bit slow. There we go. So what makes great food? So yeah, hopefully you'll have some paper and a pen in front of you, and we just want you to take a moment to have a think about, what does great food mean to you? And if we can get you, or to perhaps if you don't have paper in front of you, you could just put into the chat some of the words that come to mind when you think of great food. So we'll just give you a minute for that. Tastes good. Yes, definitely. That's a good one. Organic. Yeah. High in nutrients. Chemical free, organic. Brilliant. Texture and diverse. They're good. They're good ones. Growing consciously. I like that, Stacey. Anything else in particular coming to mind?
That's pretty well covered.
I think so, yeah.
I think that's doing well, yeah.
Kindness to animals. Yeah, that's a great one too. So, yeah, so the nutrients is one of the things that has come to mind for us. In fact, when I went through this exercise earlier, for me, great food, definitely being organic was, that's been a priority for me as someone as well, being a mother to 2 kids. I wanted to be able to feed my kids organically, but this also came up for me, you know, growing my own vegetables initially. We then faced issues with pests. We had slaters that were causing havoc. I'd be out there every night with my little headlamp trying to kill all the, not kill, but catch all the snails. I struggled with the killing bit. I actually used to, I don't know if I want to admit this, throw them on the roof for the birds to deal with, because I couldn't actually do anything myself. But anyways, because I didn't want to put chemicals on my food, which is something that's come up for others too, is not using chemicals on your food. And of course, taste is important too. You know, it's what's the point of having food if it doesn't taste good? But yeah, so nutrients, did you want to go through the list?
So as far as nutrients go, then there's the energy aspect of things, macronutrients, so the fats and the sugars. There's proteins, there's minerals, there's the vitamins, there's the phytonutrients that are those special little things that do amazing things for our health as well. But we also need a variety of nutrients. So it's not just some or another, and we need a quantity. We need the right quantity. So that's the nutrient dense foods and foods that have a nutritional integrity, that diverse range. So I think that that's part of it. And then there's the fact that the food not only is nutritious, but it's contaminant free. And so without chemical residues, and that's certainly an issue that we face these days, that the nitrates and nitrites, there's not too many nitrates and nitrites in there, they're known carcinogens, and heavy metals. We certainly don't want heavy metals. And would you believe that cadmium's quite a problem in the heavy metal side of things? That sort of comes up with particularly with the
when we want, great food. So how is this great food that we're chasing? How are microbes linked to that?
Well, it's quite simple, really. The soil is the plant stomach and the microbes do the heavy lifting. When we think about this part of things, that I'm just trying to think what I actually want to cover right now, because so the microbes in the soil are breaking down the minerals and other nutrients from the rocks, the silt, the clay, the humus, and that's in the soil, and they process it to make it available to the plants. When they're doing this, the work in the soil, they particularly are working around the roots of the plants. But would you believe they're also in and on the plant? So in the cells, oh yes, in fact some of them are in the cells and on the leaves of the plant, and there's all sorts of discoveries being made. But soil microbes not only provide nutrients, but they also provide medicines to keep the plant healthy, and they initiate chemical processes to protect the plants.
Mm-hmm.
So guess what? Your organic plants, if we've got the microbes, then they're not going to get so many diseases or pests and things like that.
Fantastic.
In amongst that too, there's other things that are going to keep the plant healthy. And would you believe there's even microbes out there that will keep them warm on a cold night and stop the frost? So all things that are going to keep the plant healthy, which then means that the plant can use the energy that it has for actually growing the stuff that we want to eat, instead of having to fight off pests or diseases and struggle for its survival. So unlike us, we have our stomachs inside our bodies, but the plant outsources the stomach to the soil. And the soil microbiome functions in many ways similar to our own microbiome. And would you believe there's a significant number of the microbes that are in our microbiome that you'll also find in the soil? Some say up to about a third.
Yeah, so 30%.
I think that would have to be somebody who's eating from really good food and grown in good soil and sort of local stuff that you're not washing bits off. So how about we get more acquainted with soil microbes?
Let's. So here we have an image of a teaspoon of healthy soil. Oops, we did have what's happening.
Oops.
There we go. And in this teaspoon of soil, we are likely to see millions or billions of bacteria, kilometers of fungi, thousands of protozoa, and hundreds of nematodes. So I'm not sure if these are words people are overly familiar with. These are the soil organisms that we're particularly interested in, and they do a really great job of many things in our soil. But in particular, what we're interested in today is how they help with getting nutrients into our food.
But would you believe, you know how many there are in the soil? Like, not only is there more microbes in that teaspoon of healthy soil than there are people on Earth, but also they weigh so much that if you think about under my little block, which is only a cottage block, about 300 square meters, there's the equivalent of a couple of kangaroos. So if you think about, in weight. So if you think about your size, the size of your block, think about what that might mean for how much with this underground livestock that you've got.
So we're now going to go through how we identify these organisms. And in the same way, in this particular image that you can see the human, you can see a microscope, and you can see a chair. We can tell that these things are what they are by their shape, their size, and their movement. Obviously in this picture, it's a picture, so you're not going to see movement, but we can tell what they are by how things, their shape, their size, and movement. And microbes are no different. So this is just a quick summary or overview of the 4 types that we've just spoken about, the bacteria, fungi, protozoa, nematodes. So we've got the arrows that point to what's what here, but in the top left image, we can see bacteria, which are the tiny white dots, or there's
we'll go through because we're going to go through them.
All right.
You're going to get even more information.
I'm going to keep my hand off that mouse because it's doing funny things. So here we have bacteria. And again, so we're looking at those tiny little dots in the background. I'll press play and you can see their movement. It's kind of like a jiggling movement or almost like it's shimmering. All of those tiny little objects you can see moving are bacteria. And in this image, we'll be looking at them at 400 times what the naked eye can see. So we're using a microscope, using the 400 times or 400 total magnification.
Sorry. What do the bacteria do?
So the bacteria are going to be taking up nutrients. They ooze this slime that's slightly alkaline. And as they sidle up to things like the rocks or sand silk clay, their ooze is breaking down the nutrients. And what they do is they take it up and they store it inside their body. So they kind of become something like bags of fertilizer, which is going to be useful. Bags of fertilizer can be useful, but not so much if they're stored in your shed. We want to get them out to the plants.
So they have to be further processed.
They have to be further processed. So we'll talk a bit more about that soon. So there you go, you can see that movement again. So moving on to fungi. There are two main functional types of fungi. We have the saprotrophic, which is the image on the left, and then on the right we have mycorrhizal fungi. Now both of these are going to store nutrients in their body. And just to go back, the saprotrophic fungi we're going to be able to see through the microscope. You can see in this image, I don't know, if I point, hopefully you can see the arrow pointing, but we're looking for these long strands here. And we can tell they're fungi. So a way to identify fungi is it's got uniform width. So it's the same width throughout. Quite often, quite often we'll see something called septa. There are these dividing walls in here. If we see that, we can tell it's fungi. If there is some fungi that doesn't have the septa, but if we see it, we know it's fungi. And they also have flat ends. So sometimes when you look through the microscope, you might see something with frayed ends or looking a bit hairy. And if we see that, it's more likely to be something like a root hair or maybe possibly a leg or something, an insect leg or something like that. The mycorrhizal fungi, in order to be able to see that, we actually need to go process of staining it. So it's not something that we'll be able to see when we look at some real soil later on tonight.
Because it's just a straight soil sample, it's not being processed.
Another difference between these two fungi is that the saprotrophic fungi feeds off dead and decaying matter, whereas the mycorrhizal fungi is known for having the symbiotic relationship with plants or roots. So the fungi has this relationship where it feeds the plant nutrients in return for the food that it needs as well. So both of these fungi play a part in providing nutrients to the plant. And again, these types of fungi will be taking up nutrients and storing in their body, but we're looking for a way to get the nutrients to the plant.
So the fungi are a bit like the bacteria, but they look quite different, don't they?
They do look different. So here we have a protozoa. This particular one here in the center, it's this egg-like shape here with a flat bottom. This one is a testate amoeba, a type of protozoa.
Ooh.
Yes?
Is this going to be a bag of fertilizer too?
It is not going to be like a bag of fertilizer. So the protozoa, the role of the protozoa here is that they are going to be consuming, in particular, the protozoa, particularly like bacteria. And this one that you can see on the screen here is going to take up a piece of organic matter and kind of pull it in and put a plug at the end and then consume the bacteria off it. And what happens is, just as we eat food and our body keeps the nutrients that we require to function, we excrete the rest. And the protozoa are exactly the same. They hold on to the nutrients they require. They're going to excrete the rest. And in doing so, it turns those nutrients into a plant available form.
So they become the spreaders.
They are the spreaders. We have fertilizer or bags of fertilizer and we have spreaders. So that's one of the protozoa. And in this image, you'll see some faster moving organisms zipping past, and the big hairy one. Did you see the big hairy one? This big hairy guy that's going quite fast is a ciliate. They're covered in cilia or hair, and the other smaller organisms that were zipping about were flagellates. And so these are all types of protozoa. They're bigger than the bacteria, which is how we identify them, and they are helping to spread the nutrients through that predatory grazing type function. And last of all, we've got our nematodes. So nematodes are actually the smallest animals in the world, but these are so tiny that we will again be using a microscope to see them. We can actually often see these guys using a microscope at the 40 times what the naked eye can see. And just like the protozoa, these guys are going to be consuming the other organisms and excreting what they don't need. So they're helping to cycle nutrients to the plant. And given that these guys are a lot larger than the protozoa as well, they're going to be really cycling a lot more nutrients than the protozoa. And I'll just quickly flag here, nematodes are quite often known for being root feeders, or the root feeding nematode causing problems. And fortunately, root feeding nematodes only make up about 5% of the nematode species. The others will consume bacteria, fungi, and there's also predatory nematodes, which will be eating other nematodes as well. And their movement is quite different again. So you can see here they have a very worm-like or serpentine movement. They're wiggling through the soil sample. So that's how we can tell them. And we've introduced these guys to you because we are now going to take a look at a real sample. This is Ellen's compost, am I correct?
This one's some compost, because I looked at my garden and my garden needs some work. So
there you go. So we are hoping you will be able to see and recognise some of those organisms we've just discussed. So
would you want me to do this bit while you, because I realised the microscope's over the other side there. And so we're just going to have a look and see. I'm just going to stop sharing the screen here because I want to share another screen. So let's have a look and see if we can see in here. So, oops. Can you, I think you should be, yeah, you can see the screen. Terrific, thank you. So Bonnie's just having a quick look around in here to see what we can see. So what you can, part of this stuff is that you'll see all these little micro aggregates and things that are in the soil. Some of you will have already seen your soil through the microscope, I'm sure. And let's see where we're going here. So the reason for doing this is because we want you to actually have an idea of what these microbes actually are. Once we've gone and had a look in here, then we will go and talk a bit more about what they all do and why they're important. So in here, any ideas what this one might be? Oops. So if you actually, anybody said that that was a nematode, you're right. So give yourselves a gold star. And if you can see all of these little bits in the background here, you can see all the bacteria that's jiggling. So this is our live sample. So we've got a live screening with our microscope. Last time, I think when we tried to move the microscope, show people, actually I might just see, they'll just move around. There's the microscope. So what else, can we see anything else there, Bon? So just very quickly, and I should go to, yeah, probably. So the bacteria, we know that the bacteria take up the nutrients, but they don't release them. They're a bit like bags of fertilizer. And it's the bacteria do a myriad of tasks. This bit here, in here, this is a form of a protozoa. So it's our protozoa. We've seen now protozoa, nematodes, and bacteria. Let's see if we can find a piece of fungi in here. Fungi is just so important in our soil, not only for taking up nutrients like phosphorus and calcium and zinc, but also for finding, holding on to water and building soil structure. The mycorrhizal fungi is incredibly important. So in here, this is another little bit of fungi that you can see here, and you can see the little scepter. So this one's in compost, and so there's not too much of a distance between the scepter, which is a good sign. So this basically is your real microbes, and this is what you'll find most of you will find in your soil. So sometimes some of you will have lots of microbes in your soil, particularly in garden soil. Sometimes we look, and for instance, in beach sand, you're not going to find very much other than bacteria. So I think we'll stop sharing there so that we can move on and we can come back if need be down here. And then we'll just go back to the screen up here. If you've got any questions, feel free to put them in and we can, we'll get to them in later on. This is where we're at. Good eye.
Okay. Let's see if we can get across. There we go.
So we look, oh, we looked at really, so
Had a look,
we
yeah.
did have a look. Well, now we've seen them. Let's see why we need them to have great food. So this is a graphic from the Food and Agriculture Organization. And I think, Georgie, will put a link up to the graphic in the chat so that you can pull that up yourself and explore it to see all the different parts that are needed. So microbes actually act as the bridge to get those nutrients from in the soil into the plants, and so that as we eat them and they'll go into our bodies, or as we eat the animals that eat the plants, we can move them into our bodies. So microbes make plants nutrients available to plants. So I want to talk about this, or we want to talk about this in fairly simple terms, but there are some fairly big words involved. Forget about the big words. Let's just think about what it actually means. So the first one is that how these microbes get the nutrients into the plants. The first one is that, would you believe that roots eat the microbes?
It's pretty crazy.
It's pretty crazy, isn't it? So they eat the microbes, take them up through their roots. They strip off their outer shells where the nutrients are held, those like bags of fertilizer, and then they spit them back out again into the soil to do it again. And so this particular process is something called rhizophagy or rhizophagy. So rhizo as in rhizosphere and phagy as in an eating. So eating from around the roots. And there's more. The mycorrhizal. So where the microbes actually swap, they do a trade. They go and collect food or collect these nutrients for the plant, and then they swap them with the plant for energy, for the carbon source to be able to do their things for everyday tasks with it. So this is mainly, it's fungi. This is the mycorrhizal fungi. And you would have heard about mycorrhizal fungi and the networks that they have between trees and plants. They are incredibly important in our soil. The last, or another one, and this is probably one of the earlier ones that was discovered, is around the what's called predatory grazing. And this is that bags and spreaders analogy that we looked at earlier. And so the bacteria and the fungi take up the nutrients and they're eaten and consumed by the protozoa and nematodes, making the nutrients plant available. To do that, just I think if we've got, we might have time if I'm fairly quick to do a quick chemistry analogy or chemistry bit there. And that is that basically bacteria has a carbon to nitrogen ratio around about 5 units of carbon to 1 unit of nitrogen. Protozoa have a carbon to nitrogen ratio around about 20 units of carbon to 1 unit of nitrogen. The protozoa come along and eat 1, 2, 3, 4 bacteria. And so now they've got their 20 units of carbon, but they've also got 4 units of nitrogen. And remember, they only needed 1. So they're going to expel 3 of those units, spit out, excrete 3 of those units of nitrogen in a plant available form. So that's not only a carbon to nitrogen ratio, it's carbon to phosphorus, carbon to sulfur, carbon to potassium, all of these things.
Nematodes have something like a carbon to nitrogen ratio of about 100
to 1. Yeah.
So they're really going to be helping cycle those nutrients.
And when they process it in this way, this is where you get these phytonutrients, these secondary metabolites. And so those of you who might have more knowledge about food will know those as phytonutrients. They reduce infection, they increase your immunity, they fight off diseases, for plants and the insect pests. So it's just really important, and you don't get that stuff from the supermarket or from the bags of fertilizer. It has to be biology that does that. Anything else there, Von, that you can think of?
I think that covers
That pretty much covers that bit. So humans can't make phytonutrients. They have to be, we have to actually get ours from the plants. And recently the microbes have been discovered to be, as I say, like in the rhizophagy, like they're in, not only in the roots, but in the leaves and the cells of the plant. So now there might even be a way to take up nitrogen from the leaves of plants, would you believe?
That was fascinating.
So this is an example. So thanks to Stephen Frost for this picture, that shows that in an experiment about the uptake of nutrients in a soil where biology is present. So I'll move on from there, but it's just great to see that the biology has such an impact on the nutrient uptake.
Just as a quick summary, basically it was found that where so we had the chemicals in the soil, but where there was sterile soil, no biology, versus the soil where there was biology, that the uptake of the plant of those chemicals,
nutrients
were much higher where there was biology there. So yeah, they're having a positive influence on what the plant can take up.
Microbes also reduce contamination in food.
They do. So they're going to assist with breaking down heavy metals.
Well, they're not so much breaking down, but they sort of lock them up, and so they take them out of being more the soluble bit. And there's one of these concerns here. There's research papers done with both bacteria and fungi have a role here. And so it means that our plants are going to not be having those heavy metals in them. And that, for instance, the cadmium has been a big one in China, with where research has been done showing so much of their rice and wheat crops have been contaminated with this heavy metal cadmium, and it's been traced back to the use. It somehow or another is tied up with the phosphate fertilizers. And the chemical residues is one where that's actually more broken down, like you were saying.
Yeah.
Yes.
So how are they going to be able to do this?
The chemical. So this is only where you haven't applied so many chemicals that you've wiped out all the microbes.
This isn't a green light to go and put chemicals out.
But basically the microbes actually deconstruct the molecules. So you're going back to your carbon and hydrogen, oxygen and things. And as far as the nitrates in our soil go, so the nitrates and nitrites, they're carcinogens, and they've been shown to be in higher levels in plants where it's grown in a high nitrogen environment, so without with synthetic nitrogens. So where we've got microbes, they're able to do that cycling and bring it in. We've got less of these contaminants in our food. All to do with microbes. Oh my goodness, this is a full-on one, isn't it?
This is the plant health pyramid, which can be found on John Kemp's website, Advancing EcoAg.
Yes, and Georgie will put up a link to that one in the chat for us too.
And so with this plant health pyramid, this is going, because down the bottom two layers that you can see there, we can achieve this level of health basically by having the right chemicals, balanced chemistry in your soil. And so we see certain things when we get to the top of the second layer. Is that correct, Ellen?
Yeah. Oh, so once we get up to the
complete protein synthesis.
Yeah, we need to get up to the complete protein synthesis. We don't get our white fly things.
This is for cabbage, yeah. But the key part here is that to reach those top two levels, and at the very top is where we're going to have plants that are resistant to pest attack and disease, we need to have active biology and not just that vigorous biology to see these two layers. And when we get to the top two layers as well, that's when we're going to start having the things like the taste and aroma, as well as being able to avoid the pests.
Yes. And so we need to give thanks to the cannabis growers for this, for actually really pulling out the fact of how important biology is in taste and aroma. And so that's going to be something that you're going to be thinking about when you're buying your food. If you want those things, you need biology in the soil.
And please go check out the website, because if you can read that fine print on there, I'm very impressed. You have fantastic eyesight. So how can you tell if you have soil microbes? So there are a few ways you can tell, and a key one is, well, one of the ways you can see without having to look through a microscope is, do you have healthy plants? If you have plants that don't have pest attack on them or aren't showing signs of disease, that's a pretty good sign that you are likely to have good biology. Another trick is to actually go and feel the leaves, particularly on a warmer day. And if they feel cool, that's a good sign that you've got good photosynthesis happening. And this can also be an indicator that you have good biology. And then if you have a look in that image, the top right-hand corner, you can see when our roots form dreadlocks, and when you pull them out, they've got the clumps of soil sticking to the roots. That's another sign you've got biology in your soil, which has to do with the sticky glues I was mentioning with the bacteria and fungi. Those sticky glues are going to help stick the particles together on those roots. And then we've got taste and smell. So again, if you think back to that John Kemp's food health pyramid at the top, where we get the taste and the aromas, we're going to have that when we have good biology. So that can indicate what's going on underneath your soil. Did you want to talk a little bit about Brix meters?
Just briefly, so some of you may be familiar with Brix meters. They'll measure the total dissolved solids in a solution, and that has a correlation with photosynthesis, which we've talked about before, because to have active high levels of photosynthesis, you need the biology in the soil. And of course, you could view using a microscope. So most people will have, as we've discussed, that will have microbes. You'll have these microbes in your soil at home. The thing is that often when we're looking, it's mainly bacteria. We don't have that diversity of microbes that are essential for healthy plants. Do you want to know how you can get more?
I reckon we should share.
Well,
So,
yeah, what do you reckon?
A key way is by growing living plants year round. And so when we have living plants, the plants essentially through that process of photosynthesis, they're going to be pumping sugars into the soil. And those sugars are what the microbes also feed on.
Not only do they feed, they love them, don't they?
They do. And also these sugars are also going to be attracting different kinds of microbes depending on what the plant needs. So, you know, we want to have that diversity of biology there. So, yeah, growing year-round plants ensures that we have a food source for these organisms. Otherwise, they're likely to go dormant or find some other food source. And then having a diversity of plants. So just like us, we all have, you know, our human gut biome. But as well as that, each of us as individuals are going to have slightly different gut microbes, a different gut biome. Plants are no different. Each of them have their own microbiome. So when we're growing a diversity of plants, that means we're also going to have.
But why would we want different ones?
Well, we need different ones because when we have different microbes, they all have different jobs. Again, just like humans, each of these microbes have their own skills that are individual for each of these organisms. So, for example, Ellen's fantastic at making compost.
I would go that far.
Yeah, this is why we use your compost. And my skills, what are my skills?
Oh, you have all sorts of amazing skills at finding things in the microscope, at looking after your children beautifully.
I try. But the point is, everyone has individual skills that we all have. So when we have a diversity of plants and have that diversity of biology, all of these little microbes are going to be doing different things. Like some might be particularly good at sourcing boron, or some might be particularly good, as Ellen said, there's some microbes that are particularly good at protecting plants against frost. They come and provide their little blanket and protect the plant. So this is.
But I guess it's a bit like that analogy that we sometimes talk about building a house. And so if we want to build a house, or if either of us wanted to build a house this coming weekend by ourselves, we couldn't do it. But if we've got enough plumbers, carpenters, tea makers, urban planners, conflict resolutionists, etc., 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 if we've got that diversity and the quantity, it's likely to happen. So that's why we need a diversity of plants, because each plant has that different set of skills in it as well as the common ones. So
Next, we have biostimulants. So this is like the coffee for microbes. There's various different biostimulants you can use that wake up microbes, because quite often we can have up to 80% of our soil microbes being dormant in the soil.
Yeah, at any one time.
At any one time. So some biostimulants include
things like the compost and the humates, worm castings.
Worm castings is a great one.
Mm.
And lastly, inoculants. So we can add in microbes as opposed to waking up what's already there. So there's a number of ways you can inoculate. You might be thinking about, again, compost, depending on what stage the compost might be in, compost tea, worm castings again. You can buy products that do have microbes. You may not be getting the diversity that you'd be looking for, but you can buy them. Have I missed what else?
There's probably some other ways, but that's some of the ways, and people can please feel free to ask the questions later. So how do you keep them happy? I mean, now you've got them. How do you keep them happy?
Microbes are just like us. They need very similar things to stay alive: food, air and water, protection, and we like to add friends too. So that diversity we're looking for. They're the key things. So,
but how did we do that? How do we do all these things?
So keeping our ground covered. Again, that's coming back to, we have the food for them. So by keeping the ground covered, we have plants that are pumping the sugars into the ground. And yes, this includes weeds. So for those that hate weeding, just scrap it all together.
And it keeps, I think it helps to minimize that changes in temperature. So too cold, too hot, things like that too.
Keeps the ground covered. Plant diversity.
That's for the food, I guess, isn't it, with the exudates again?
It is. Limit digging. So I think fungi in particular are probably most harmed by digging. It can actually break up those very fragile strands of fungi, but it's also going to be exposing the microbes to things like the heat and air.
And it's funny because it's actually the roots. So it's important to have air in the soil, but it's actually the roots that really like the air. And microbes have a variety of needs. Both some like lots of air and some don't like too much. But then we have to limit the compaction. So we've got to air. So we've got to get the air for the roots. So we might do that perhaps by using some sort of mechanical means, whether it be machinery on a farm or a garden fork in your home garden. And you can also use plants, like deep-rooted plants, to actually break up the soil.
Avoiding synthetic fertilizers. So some of these fertilizers that we may not be using often salt-based. And if we think about in the kitchen, when we want to preserve things, what are we going to be doing? We're going to be using salt, perhaps, which dries things out. And essentially, it's going to be doing the same to our microbes.
And particularly fungi. There's plenty of research now that's showing that fungi are particularly affected by the use of synthetic fertilizers. But we can also look at...
Ellen has a good story about using fertilizers in her fungi.
Could always ask if you want to know. But so let's look for alternatives when it comes to synthetic fertilizers. Let's look to things like your minerals and your what do you call it? The minerals, the rock dust, the weed teas, and your worm castings, those sort of things. Look for alternatives for that. And of course, we want to avoid the pesticides, the herbicides and the fungicides, the insecticides and the maticides.
All the sides. Because what are they trying to do? Fungicides, they're looking to kill fungi, and they're not going to discriminate against only the bad ones. Yeah, I guess, we talk about often that sometimes you may have a need to use one of these things to get something that's very out of balance. You may need to, but just be aware that it's going to have an effect on the good guys, and then you will want to mitigate any harm you might be doing by using these things.
So that it's like us with our antibiotics. So sometimes we might need to use antibiotics, but we make the use of the probiotics afterwards to look after them. So if you do need to use any of these things, we're not actually fundamentalists about this, but if you can't find an alternative to them and you do need to apply them, try to apply as little as possible. Apply it directly to the target organism that you're going to, you try to do, instead of broadly spraying, try and reach your target. And importantly, a couple of days afterwards, within a day or two afterwards, give them a really nice rich source of carbon, so humates or compost or something like that, in order to mitigate that, bit like that probiotics for us.
And I see Michael's asked, aren't worms good for combating compaction too?
Of course, yes, they are. And so is biology, when you've got your the nematodes and things in there. So with that bit in mind, let's recap. Microbes they're just integral to healthy plants. We've seen how microbes are important for plants being nutritious, to how plants can be free of contaminants, and to plants tasting and smelling good. Microbes are integral to all of those things. And we can look after our soil microbes by feeding them, by growing a diversity of living plants all year round, by keeping them happy with air, food, water and protection, and choosing alternatives to synthetic fertilizers and chemicals. So at that point, does anybody have any questions? We shall stop sharing our screen so we can see you more easily. And if you have any questions, would you like to either put them in the chat or
raise your hand?
Yeah, raise your hand. Down the bottom here, you've got your reactions little thing, and there's a hand raise icon there. So do we have
certificates will be posted to?
There's no certificate, unfortunately, for this course, for this workshop. I'm sorry, Zoma. I hope you've enjoyed watching though, or being part of it. And so worms and how do synthetics? Oh, so how do synthetics harm things? There's a combination, a number of things. So first up, it's like with our bodies or with things where you just go and do one thing. So you provide the you think that, okay, this germ, so it's like, so let's start with the germ theory, terrain theory part. So germ theory is there's something causing an illness, and so we are going to go and kill that one thing. And so often it's not always, but often in this case it's using a synthetic. And whereas terrain theory is about actually acknowledging that things need to be just kept in balance, that we have good things and bad things. And so we say often that it's handy to have a burglar who's a housebreaker in your midst at times, simply because if you lose your keys, you might have somebody to be able to help you get in. And provided they, it's all kept under control, it works well. The synthetics also take, so things like your herbicides. I think it's Treflam has been trying to absolutely wipe out, or not, yeah, pretty much wipe out protozoa. Glyphosate has an impact on the shikimate pathway, so that again affects something that's then we eat it and it affects us. But basically, I guess the synthetic in the harm part of things, oh my goodness, don't you just love it when sometimes you just think, what on earth am I waffling on about? Probably one of the biggest harms that synthetics do when it comes to fertilizers particularly is that they make the plants lazy, because they're effectively getting room service at all hours of the night and day. So the plant doesn't bother putting out the exudates because it's getting the soluble fertilizers, and then it doesn't put out the exudates, which means the microbes don't come and do their things. And that means you're not getting the phytonutrients, which then means that you're not getting the healthy substances that come from that, the disease and pest resistance, both in ourselves and in the plant.
We often use the analogy of drip feeding, like having someone in hospital on the drip feed. When we're feeding the plants these synthetic things, we're feeding them what they want, what we think they want when we think they need them. And then their needs may be beyond that. But yeah, if we're giving them the nutrients, as Ellen said, they become lazy, they don't feed the microbes, and then they don't necessarily have access to the things that they need when they need it, because those microbes may have gone dormant or moved on.
I hope that helps, Steve.
Michael.
And also what causes wilting tomatoes? So I'm not a horticulturalist, but my understanding is that often wilting tomatoes is associated with root-feeding nematodes. Root-feeding nematodes, if you think about what we just talked about with that germ theory, terrain theory, root-feeding nematodes, don't really get a look in where you've got a good, healthy, diverse microbiome in the soil. And also, they are actually often, as a positive thing, they are perhaps giving you an indicator that your plant isn't as healthy as it might be. So, and because it's probably not as healthy as it might be because we're lacking some of those things in the soil.
Michael, I read years ago that earthworms make toxic things that they eat safe. So it's the same with microbes.
It is a bit. So, I mean, obviously, in general terms, you could say that, Michael. But of course, it's not. There's limits, and also there's the type of different types of microbes do different things. I mean, fungi are particularly known as doing remediation, micro-remediation of soils with the heavy metals. But yes, it is similar. Again, if you've got lots of microbes in your soil, you're not going to have anywhere near those issues that you would have otherwise. And from Copper, so also synthetic fertilizers are salts. Yes, yeah. And that's as Bonnie was saying there, that the salts effectively kill the microbes. That's why you use them when you're making your beef jerky and things like that.
Okay. Should soil mix highly in microbes? Will microbes affect seeds about to germinate? I mean, cause any disease or damage?
Oh. So the seed itself actually has its own microbiome inside it, ready to pop out through the roots as the seedling emerges. So
that's dependent on the health of the plant,
where
the parent plant
where
as well.
Yeah. So plants that are grown organically in good, diverse microbiological soil with really lots of activity, they're actually going to be really strong when they push out. So the soil mix, that if it's got a high in microbes, it should be fine. The seed itself is important, and then to have the seed inoculated with healthy microbes, such as what you might have in your compost and things. Again, go by your smell too. So your smell is going to have if you what you're smelling, and carefully make sure it's damp first. Don't try and smell dusty things. That's going to affect your lungs. That will be useful. And so worm castings, again, the worm tea is really good for inoculating your seeds. And you've seen some seeds go moldy. Yep, some seeds will go moldy, particularly if the environment is too wet or and so it's possibly a combination of the more the environmental issues.
Can compost be complete without animal manures using scraps from a vegetarian diet?
The answer is yes. So we know people who make commercial compost in the hundreds and thousands of tons, not using manures.
Any manure, yeah.
Well, not using any manure except probably the bird droppings and whatever, and things. So the biggest thing is having that diversity. So in a diversity of plants. So if you've have lots of different veggies in your vegetarian diet, that's certainly going to help. Remember, sorry, yes, Steve.
Just adding
to unmute yourself.
Oh. No, I think I'm unmuted.
Hang on, I'll just see if you can unmute yourself first. I can't hear you.
Yeah.
All right.
Why
can't we hear you?
Can you hear me now? No.
Oops.
Is your sound off? Just one moment.
Try that.
Oh, yep. Sorry,
okay,
go ahead.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Just adding to that question, what role do worms play in compost? Because at the moment what I've been using is just putting the compost on the ground and all the scraps and things, and the worms, it's full of worms doing whatever they're doing, and that's what goes on to the veggie garden, and that's it. We don't use anything else. So what are the worms adding to it?
Oh, the worms are processing. So they're actually eating. They're not actually eating directly the the veggie scraps, they're eating the microbes, the bacteria that are actually on the veggie scraps. And so that processing that's happening out the back end of the worms is coming not only all this amazing fertilizer, which I'm sure you're aware of, but also these different enzymes and hormones that are going to be doing this signaling in the soil, the chemical signaling that's going to wake other things up and set things in action.
So is there anything you have to, sorry, one last question. Is there anything you have to add to a compost pile, you know, to make it healthy? You know, do you have to check pH much or those kind of things? Or if you've got to...
Probably the best thing is to make sure that is the moisture and air and the diversity of things. So we'd often suggest that you're making your compost using a 60% browns mix, like carbon.
Okay.
And it's a lot more probably than what people might often think, but 60% carbon, 30% or thereabouts. Well, there's in your case 40% of greens. So otherwise you might be looking at 30% greens and about 10% of an animal manure. It's making sure that you've got it laid. I usually make mine in one hit. So I don't only use the Getty bins. I've only got a small block, but I'll collect everything. I use a Bokashi bin to process my veggie scraps and hold it in there until it's ready to make. And then the moisture side of things, just make sure that it's a really good environment for the microbes to work. And so that might be that with the water that you squeeze it, you should only get 1 drop of water out of your hand when you squeeze it. If it's no drop of water, add water. If there's more drops of water, add more carbon. And yeah, I think as far as that goes. And so that what we were looking at tonight was a compost mix, so that had plenty of bacteria, a diversity of bacteria, and protozoa and nematodes and fungi in it.
It's possible to use different things depending on what kind of compost you want to make, isn't it? Like,
yes.
We're interested in ensuring there's fungi in the compost. So Ellen uses a lot of wood chips to encourage that.
And so certainly a Johnson Sue type of compost, if you have the look up, that will certainly help with your fungi. But I suggest that by the sound of your questions, Dave, you'll be on the right track. Thank you.
Thanks.
What else have we got here? Can composting? Try to encourage. Oh, terrific. That's great, Michael. I'd like to thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
And you'll try to further encourage the healthy growth and balance of microbes. Fantastic. And what is the best animal you are? The best animal manure to use on a vegetable garden is a well composted animal manure. I'll leave it at that, but please definitely compost it. And
hi, Carly.
Hi, Carly. That could be interesting. Yeah, more than happy to have a try from the microbial aspect of things. To do that, did anybody else have any particular questions? Because 5 minutes, but what we'd like to ask you to do is take a minute or two, and happy if you want to add any more questions there, but we'd love you to take a moment or two to reflect on what you're going to do now. As a result of listening to the presentation tonight, what's the one action that you're going to take away that from what you've learned this evening?
Steve, we're going to send the presentation to Shire SJ. So yeah, basically it'll be up to them as to what they want to do. So you may want to reach out to them. They might be happy to share that.
Who is that again?
The Shire of Serpentine, Jarrahdale.
Shire, yeah, okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Add some cardboard. Brilliant, Ruby.
Fantastic. Cardboard, wood chips, and the carbon is just so important, and diversity. Everything, it comes down to diversity. Terrific, Michael. Oh, wonderful, Brenna. Yeah, broad beans and green manure, and weeds. And actually, can we share, Brenna, that we saw your cover crop the other day, and it has got a beautiful variety of diversity in it. Steve, you're going to keep yours moist and brown's good on you. And Carly, yes, you do need to get your microscope out. So there's it's just amazing. So, I mean, it's been hard tonight to just keep touching on the so many different roles of microbes. We haven't even talked about their role in soil structure that actually then makes the environment in which plants grow so much easier for them to be able to actually use energy to put it into the nutritional aspect of things rather than doing things. And something that sort of, I guess, has been concerning for us is that these days so often we're actually see that people are being rewarded for their yield. So they're trying to get more yield. They're getting paid by the ton or by the kilo or whatever, and it rather than being paid for the nutrient density, for the quality of the nutrition. And when we don't have nutritious food, we've actually got to eat more food to actually get those. It's like a dilution effect, and so we're eating more carbohydrates, which then means that we've got more obesity and more other issues. These other things that are happening. Microbes are just absolutely integral to having healthy food in all of those ways. So I see here Michael saying that you have a corner in your garden that's very sandy and you're trying to build it up with clay, compost, shredded paper, cardboard, plant diversity and cover from the harsh sun. My goodness, let's send a photo. I'd love to see a photo of it in another 3 or 4 months time there, Michael. I think that's going to be flourishing. Well, so on that, I think our work is actually predicated on a quote from Sir David Attenborough, and he says that no one will protect what they don't care about, and no one will care about that they've never experienced. We hope that tonight that you've had that opportunity to experience soil microbes, real ones that came out of the little test tube that we've collected from our sample today, and to be able to put that into action. So thank you for sharing your time with us, and may your microbes be diverse and plentiful. Happy growing.
Yes. Thank you very much.
Thank you.